We'll cross to College Green in London. I'm so looking forward to this. The Sun's chief political correspondent in the dark, hopefully with not a man with a placard saying Jeremy Kyle's in the background. Jack Elstrom, good afternoon. No man with a flag.
Afternoon, Jeremy.
See, now this is the beauty of doing this in the winter. Absolutely nothing. How are you, J.E.? You all right?
Well, it's the beauty for you, although Alex the cameraman and myself are absolutely freezing our backsides off out here. So you should be very honoured that I've come out from my cosy office in the Houses of Parliament to brave the elements and speak to you and your listeners.
You're very, very kind. We appreciate it. What's this rumour I hear that you're off to do I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, Jack Elstrom? Is that true?
Well, they tapped me up, but unfortunately couldn't afford me. But I actually hear that potentially you were going to be going to the jungle.
Let's move on,
Jeremy.
Let's
but also,
move on.
You know,
let's move on. Shocking news. Shocking news. The Archbishop of Canterbury, and I am really strong on this, Jack, and I'm really interested politically what the feeling is inside Westminster. Justin Welby was giving some examples out that Ryan gave me earlier. You'd know this because of the job you do. He called the EU the greatest dream realised for human beings since the fall of the Western Roman Empire. He linked Brexit to Trump and fascism, and he made comparisons of the Rwanda plan to Nazism and called it ungodly. This is a man who has been not backward in criticising almost everything that doesn't agree with his guarding, reading, left-winging sort of thoughts. But lo and behold, he knew what Smith was up to and said nothing. That is disgusting, is it not?
Totally, and in fact, a piece I've just written for The Sun, you know, I make the point that he's meant to be God's conduit on earth, but actually it turns out in the past few years he's had a lot to say for himself. All manner of things, you know, in which case many critics would hope that he would observe some sort of Trappist silence, but actually he seems to be wading into politics on every other given issue, whether it's Brexit, as you mentioned, whether it was Partygate, in which he says that the trust of our institutions has been eroded. Not quite sure why he felt the need to say that. But also, most recently, of course, in Rwanda, in which he stood up from his position as an unelected cleric in the House of Lords and encouraged people to vote against this Rwanda bill, the government's flagship immigration policy at the time, because he thought that God wouldn't agree with it. And so, you know, while obviously these allegations and the scandal which he's found himself now is absolutely horrific, there won't be a lot of love lost for him in parts of Westminster who have found his meddling to be quite honestly beyond the pale for a few years now.
It's really interesting. I mean, you talked about those examples. He also, I mean, with COP29 going on, or COP out as I call it, he likened the climate threat to Nazism. He liked to throw words like Nazism and fascism around quite a lot. I find it really frightening, and I don't know where you stand on this. I guess it's a personal matter. When you consider where the church is at, when you consider there are so few bums on pews, as James Price quite rightly said just now, you'd want somebody who heads the church to be concentrating on his own house. And when you discover that his own house has that many problems and he's covered it up, there's no options. People are going further this afternoon. They're saying to me, Jack, that he should have his honours taken away. He should be stripped of those. Do you think this is the end of the line, him resigning, or do you think this could go deeper?
It's interesting, like you said, you know, his supporters over the years have seen him as a beacon of morality, someone that can, you know, preach to the teachings of the church and apply that to our Westminster politics. But his critics say that he's just been wading into things that don't concern him, way beyond the purview of the church. And it's actually interesting today, there's a debate in the House of Commons about the role of the Lords in general. Don't forget that the Archbishop of Canterbury and a few dozen other bishops have an ordained right to sit in the House of Lords. The UK and Iran are the only countries in the world in which clerics have a guaranteed seat in the legislature.
The UK and Iran?
Archbishop Justin Welby and the UK and Iran are the only places in the world in which clerics have an automatic seat to legislate for laws in their Houses of Parliament. And so it sparked the whole debate about whether we need, or in fact we should have these sort of religious figures in Parliament. Whether or not he's going to have his honours stripped, I don't know. But also there's the interesting point about how when many archbishops leave their role, They got automatic seats in the House of Lords for the rest of their life. Whether he will have that afforded to him, we don't know. He's obviously left this role under a cloud. In fact, it's interesting, you know, he's dabbled in politics now for many years, and so it was quite ironic, I thought, the fact he resigned had a bit of a whiff of Westminster about it. The constant drip of calls for him to quit, him then digging his heels in over a few days, the pressure builds, the dam bursts, and eventually he bows to the inevitable, and so that's what we've seen today.
No, good riddance to bad rubbish. Two other things I want to talk about. This is central to Westminster right now, this terminally ill assisted dying bill. Terminally people can take their own life within 3 weeks. This is really interesting. The person, Ledbetter, who's brought in the bill, says her plan is focused on shortening harrowing death rather than ending life. For me, I gave the story earlier about my parents. I can see both sides. This is a really difficult one, isn't it, Jack?
It's so difficult. It's really torn Westminster. Keir Starmer today hasn't even said how he'd vote for it, which I think is actually quite interesting because previously he indicated that he would be in favour of some sort of assisted dying bill. I think a lot of people are quite annoyed the fact this has come via a private member's bill rather than a government bill itself, because it's left to essentially an individual MP to sort of draw the parameters of how this bill would work. You know, people would say that obviously it's difficult for the government to do it because it means they're taking a side and they want this to be a neutral issue which MPs can choose as a matter of conscience rather than with their party whips. But a lot of MPs, I think the general view was that while when this debate last came up, it was obviously opposed and didn't go through the House of Commons, there has been a change of attitudes. I think more people believe that this should be allowed to happen. But whether or not it actually manages to pass the Commons when it comes up for second reading is another matter, because people agree with it in principle, but they're not totally convinced that the safeguards exist at the moment. And so it's interesting to see people like the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who has come out against or indicated that he's going to vote against the assisted dying bill, because as he sees it, at the moment, palliative care in this country just isn't good enough. And so when you're talking about a choice for people that are terminally ill, whether they opt to end their own lives, there's a lot of argument now that in theory that is good, but what choice is it really if the choice is between ending your own life or suffering in a system which actually isn't as good as it should be, and maybe the focus should be on improving palliative care instead. So it's really difficult, and it's going to be talking about in Westminster for the next few weeks.
Completely agree. Just this from Alison quickly, and we'll move on to COP. She says, Jez, I believe there should be assisted dying. Being ill myself and suffering the excruciating all-over body pain I have 24/7, I personally would choose it. What I disagree with it is that politicians are giving their own views when it should be a bill that the voters get to decide on. That's a very interesting one. We're getting into referendum time. Let's make it a little bit less serious. COP29, or Cop Out 29, I was talking about, by mistake, Makin was on 5 Live. I'm listening to this utterly deranged BBC reporter at 10 o'clock this morning saying, in response to an email that said, come on, all the people that are causing all these carbon emissions aren't even at this bloody conference. Nobody cares. There's Starmer talking about 81% reductions, right? Nobody's bothered. Trump's going to come and veto the whole thing anyway. And why isn't Starmer's backside back in Britain dealing with pensioners who are freezing to death and veterans who are living on the streets? This is absolutely... And then it all kicked off. The president or some high-up man in Azerbaijan opened the conference by saying oil and gas is a gift from God. I love that, Jack. That was brilliant, man.
Yeah, and I think the critics of the climate summit would say that it has just turned into a bit of a talking shop. You know, whatever your views on climate change, you know, I happen to be, you know, supportive of sort of green measures to be able to help the planet, and a lot of people will. But in terms of, you know, flying all the way to Azerbaijan, for one, the conference to open in farce, as you said, when the president of Azerbaijan extolled the virtues of fossil fuels. Then you have the key players and the world's main emitters not there. So, you know, where's the Chinese president? Where's Joe Biden? You know, where's Macron? Where's Olaf Scholz? It does seem like a bit of a sort of a talking shop if you're just going to, you know, get around the table and talk about climate change without them. It's noble, I think, that Keir Starmer wants to reduce the UK's emissions. However, we are a tiny, tiny fraction of global pollutants and therefore would barely even, you know, touch the sides when it comes to global warming as a whole. And so I think that's the situation we're in at the moment, and you know there have to be ways to try and protect the planet. But is going to Baku to talk about this the answer? I'm not sure, especially with the Trump presidency looming.
The only reason that you're for climate, all that climate agenda, is because you're stood on College Green in London and you're freezing. You want it to get hotter in the world and then you wouldn't be cold. Listen, really appreciate it, mate. Back to your little office, get yourself a cup of coffee, get Alex sorted as well. The incredible Jack Elstrom, Chief Correspondent of The Sun, live for Talk Drive there.